Dram watering tools have been the professional's choice for quality and durability for 80 years. Use a Dram rain wand to create the softest shower of rain for your beds and containers, a 9-pattern revolver spray gun for a variety of uses, or a Colour Storm sprinkler for a lush green lawn and garden. Dram, the professional's choice for lawn and garden. Available at a fine garden centre near you. Visit us online at dramm.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm an associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hi, and I'm Danielle. I'm the executive editor here at FG. And today, Carol, the precursor to this topic was, I just told you, our biggest trending, most popular article online at Fine Gardening this spring 2022 is about ground covers. So today we are talking about weed suppressing ground covers. I cannot believe that the ground covers article beat out pruning hydrangeas, the champ of all champ articles.
Somebody had to knock it from the top, I guess. I'm surprised it was ground covers, though.
Me too. But, I think that ground covers are one of those unsung heroes of the garden, if you will. The more that we've been reading about matrix gardening and more naturalistic gardening and more sustainable gardening, they always talk about having that ground cover layer, that green mulch, as opposed to each year having to get 12 yards of mulch to, keep the weeds at bay in your gardens. And I confess I don't have enough ground covers. What about you?
I have some, and when I was writing this list for the show today, I was like, oh, I love all of these. I think ground covers get not enough respect.
They don't, because, they not only suppress weeds, they cover the ground. So, there is some moisture retention there as well. They do all those positive things that mulch do, even to the point of, with deciduous ground covers, they're dying off in the winter. All of that detritus gets basically to be a leaf litter type action that, makes its way into the soil as well as, just as well as mulch does. So yeah, I realize making my list, I just don't have enough. I have some, but I just don't have enough. So we got to go back to the last episode or 2 episodes ago. I got to redo my shopping list now. Well, so tell me about some of the ground covers that you've got in your garden. What do you have up first on your list? Is it something you've grown, have currently, or it's a want and wish?
No, this is one I have currently, and it's a new plant. We got this as a sample, I'd say 3 years ago, drops of Jupiter oregano. And so it's
talk to me, because
right.
I was gun shy on that sample plant, did not buy it because I had visions of the first oregano plant that I ever planted taking over the vegetable garden. So maybe you can set me straight on its habit.
Yeah, it will not take over. So I've been growing it 3 years. I planted it like a ground cover on like 2-foot centers
Nice.
Because it gets like 2 feet wide or 2 feet tall and 3 feet wide. So it's like, if I want it to grow together, I'll do it on 2-foot centers. By year 3, it's almost touching. I think this will be the year that it will grow together and really sort of form a mat. But what's neat about this is not really a culinary oregano. You can eat it. It's edible, but doesn't have quite as strong a flavor as the culinary ones. But what's special about it is the foliage. It has beautiful golden foliage. And the more sun it gets, it likes full sun. You can put it in partial shade, but the more sun it gets, the blonder it will be. So pretty colored leaves, and then the flowers are this gorgeous, like dark purple. I think it's actually the calyces that are the dark purple color. The flowers themselves are a lighter purple, like, any oregano flower. But against that golden foliage, it's a really nice contrast. And doesn't get too tall, doesn't spread by rhizomes as far as I can tell, although I do see some stems sort of like going under and surfacing out, a few inches further from the center each year. But I don't think this thing is going to run and like make new plants all over the place. It's a nice, well-behaved ground cover, and definitely plenty of foliage to keep those weeds down too. I think one of the things that might have scared you off about this, when you saw those sample plants, they had been in kind of rough conditions, like baking in the sun, and they were starting to look a little ragged. But what I did when I took them home was I cut all of that, raggedy looking growth off, and it pushed up new growth, looked great within
immediately.
Really recovered very quickly.
Oh, and that's awesome.
Yeah. And once established, it's quite drought tolerant. It just didn't love sitting in pots in the baking sun for weeks while we were deciding if we wanted to take
in the middle of a parking lot at that. I mean, geez, I can't understand why it didn't like those conditions. Sounds ideal to me. Yeah, well, that's good to know about the running nature of it, because honestly, that was my biggest full stop on that. And I feel like after 3 years, you would know if this is going to be a thug, I mean, I think you would have known after year 1 if it was going to behave like, the typical culinary oregano that we have. All right. So very interesting. I might insist that you cleave off a piece of that for me at some point in time, Carol. Not this year, because they're finally touching. You finally get they did what they needed to do. But maybe next year I can convince you to cleave off a piece for me.
When it starts heading in a direction that I don't want it to go, that's where I'll take the clumps from that side for you.
That's good. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, I'll continue on with our herb theme, quote unquote, and go with an herb as well, but one that, is known as a culinary herb, but this is more of the ornamental side of things. And it's woolly thyme, which is Thymus pseudo-lagunan. All right, here we go. I'm going to be able to do it. Pseudo-lanuginosis. Lanuginosis. Anyway, woolly thyme. And it's zones 5 to 8. I don't think that this will be a novel plant for most people, but I noticed that throughout my garden, a lot of the ground covers that I do have are different variations on creeping thyme. And I just love creeping thyme because it tolerates full sun, lean soil, well-drained, drought conditions. And check. That's mostly what I have throughout my garden. And this guy only gets to be about 6 inches tall. Truth be told, mine has never gotten much more than 4 inches tall. It's pretty ground hugging, but 1 to 3 foot spread on this creeping thyme. And so you can imagine it's got those teeny tiny little wiry stems that mass together in this kind of network of nesting stems, teeny tiny little leaves, little teardrop leaves, and they're green, but they have an excessive amount of white hairs on them. So from a distance, woolly thyme really looks silvery glaucous blue. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I think that's, that makes it that much cooler in the thyme realm of things. I've talked on the podcast before about Foxley thyme, which is another ground cover thyme that's just a variegated version of creeping thyme. But woolly thyme, really, it's got that little something extra. I've also noticed that perhaps because of the texture, I've got it in an area where occasionally I get some deer grazing, and the deer will eat some other forms of thyme that I have, but they will not touch the woolly thyme. I'm guessing that hairiness causes indigestion or something. I don't know. But beautiful, mats together quickly. Planting it on 2 foot centers or 3 foot centers, eventually you're going to have this gorgeous matting ground cover. And it's a great in-betweener. It's not something that's going to strangle out any of the other plants that it's mingling with. It's really just going to provide this green mulch at the base of those plants. You can expect pinkish purple flowers in early summer around here. Generally by the 4th of July, they're in full bloom, and pollen pollinators aplenty. You get to see a lot of the pollinators on it. But I just love creeping thyme. And I think the last time I had mentioned a creeping thyme on the podcast, we got some emails about people saying, but it's such a pain in the ass to have to clean out in fall. Well, I don't feel that way. I just had to do my garden, my spring clean out, and I just take a metal rake to it. Those deciduous teeny tiny leaves just kind of fall away. And the second you seem to do that with a metal rake and get the leaves and such out, it pushes new growth, so you really don't notice it. So I don't sit there with tweezers and pick out every teeny tiny little leaf. So no more letters. I gave you some maintenance tips, all right? So Carol, usually I take a little peek at your list ahead of time, but I did not this time because we put it on our server so we can get ready for what we're going to talk about. I didn't see your list. I'm curious if you have an edible on your list.
I think that the oregano is as close as I can to an edible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking, Carol, edible gardener extraordinaire, that perhaps there was like a microgreen or something you were going to recommend. But all right, I was wrong. Give me your next plant.
My next plant. So we've been talking in the recent episodes about catmins. And our focus has been on these newer cultivars that are smaller, more compact. But sometimes what you really need is, a big, lofty catmint. And so for those kind of situations, I like Six Hills Giant catmint.
We're going the opposite end.
Yeah.
Not the teeny tinies. Give us the big old boy.
This is the big one. It's Nepeta Six Hills Giant, hardy from zones 4 to 7. Many sources say zones 3 to 8. So I think that your colder zone people, give it a try. And it gets pretty big, 2 to 3 feet tall, about 4 feet wide. Yeah. So this is it's like, when it really gets going, it's like, gray clouds at ground level with those pretty purple catmint flowers. This was a top performer in the Chicago Botanic Garden, did a catmint's trial, which was covered in our magazine in issue 152.
Yeah. Look it up online, folks.
Look it up online. If you're an all access member, you have full access to all of our archives, including this issue. Richard Hockey in the article described this as the archetypal catmint, and one by which all other catmints can be judged or should be judged.
Drop the mic. That's it. Like, you don't need any other catmint.
Yeah. So I agree. I got a gift certificate when we moved our offices like years ago. I got a gift certificate. This is one of the plants I bought. I think that article must have just come out, and I was like, alrighty then. That makes my decision easy. And I had a spot where I really just wanted to hold ground. Not a lot of other plants there, but I don't want to be mulching out there all the time. So boy, I had 3 plants. It has covered many, many square feet. It feels like it has gotten bigger than 4 feet wide. And I pulled one of the plants out of there last season and divided it. And I got 3 or 4 plants were all, from the same crown. So it divided pretty easily. I was surprised. I was very nervous because I hadn't tried dividing a catmint before. But the new plants doubled in size within, the first month. So it did really well. And I think it's a good catmint. There you go.
Well, and that, you bring up a good point that we haven't really talked about with ground covers. Another bonus to them is so many of them, because of the way that they spread and they multiply, through stolons or through, the rhizomatic kind of habits, they're easy to divide. That's a plant. We always say, oh, you've got to wait for it to, the creep, the sleep, or the sleep, the creep, the leap year, and then you can divide. A lot of these I have purchased, and within a year to 2 years, you're able to cleave and divide and actually get a lot more plants, and not be spending a boatload at the nursery, which is a bonus, especially if you're trying to cover a lot of grounds, like you were saying with your catmints. You've got an entire area you're trying to fill in, and instead of having to go out and buy 15 plants. You can buy, 5 plants and within a couple of years fill in that area.
Yeah.
Which, awesome.
The other thing I like about catmints is they are just so tough. They need full sun really, but they can take garbage soil. Yeah. Hell strip, fine. Top of a rock wall, loves it. It'll fill in the top of the rock wall, and a few of the little shoots will sort of be doing a Thelma and Louise, like off the edge of it. It's fun. It's pretty cute leaves, little scalloped edge, gray, silver gray color.
Yes. And pretty deer, rabbit, small woodland creature resistant, because it's kind of got that pungent, aroma to it. Now the neighborhood cat might flatten it out a few times, but other than that, you're good to go. You're good to go. Well, so I have another edible. I don't know. I was channeling my inner Carol when I made my list here. I'm going to go with wild strawberry, which is Frigeria fesca. Dare I say, I'm going to say any strawberry, but I'm going to go with wild strawberry just because it's a native to most of the U.S., except for, I looked it up, Alaska and parts of the deep South. And a little corner of Nebraska. So sorry, it's not native for you guys. For everybody else, it's native. Strawberry is one of those things. It's a mistake, actually, that I planted. I put it in my vegetable garden, and I thought, oh, it's going to be so cute, like all those English gardens, and I'm just going to have this little row of strawberries right along my bed edge. Well, no, that's not how strawberries work, So all of a sudden, I had runners, and they were taking over the beds, and then they were hopping into the pathways, and, they weren't strangling anything, but it was definitely not the well-behaved, look that I was trying to emulate from these British potager gardens. So I pulled out a bunch of the strawberry, and I nestled it underneath a whole stand of panicle hydrangeas that I have. And it was a pain in the neck area to weed. I would mulch it, but regardless, I would still get in some weed action underneath there. So I just threw them under there, and lo and behold, 2 years later, they've made this really nice green mat underneath the panicle hydrangeas. They are lovely. It's not, as aggressive. The wild strawberry, the Frigeria fesca, isn't as aggressive as the hybrid strawberries that we grow for strawberry crops. This is more, if you're familiar with Alpine strawberries, it behaves a little bit more like that. Same really heavily tri-lobed leaves that are toothed on the edge. Same beautiful spring. It's blooming right now. Actually, you'll see a photo online of mine. It's blooming with those really sweet little white flowers, little yellow center. And then it does fruit, but the fruits are a little bit smaller. Not as prolific, you're not harvesting quarts and quarts and quarts of fruit, but still a decent amount to throw on your French toast on a Sunday morning, and they taste great. I just think that there's nothing wrong with using the strawberries in that fashion as that ground cover. And it was just something that never dawned on me. We just always say, oh yeah, edibles go in the edible garden and ornamentals go in the ornamental. Well, here's like that perfect ornamental edible action that happens. And if you're looking for a stoloniferous plant that makes a serious mat, strawberries are where it's at, man. They are great. Carol, what about you? I mean, I know having grown a lot of edibles, are you in the strawberry game? Have you ever tried thinking about it as a ground cover?
I've had strawberry beds probably 3 or 4 times in my life. Right now I don't, because the voles apparently love to eat strawberry crowns. But I have regular culinary strawberries, and then I have an Alpine strawberry that is, I forget, it's like a yellow wonder. It has yellow berries, and that's fun. The Alpine strawberries don't do the runner thing though. So if you want a ground cover, you're going to have to plant them a little closer together, I think.
Yeah, they are. They're more of a clumping habit. And then the wild strawberry, which is the Frigeria fesca, is a runner, but it's not as prolific as those hybrid cropping strawberries are as well. But yeah, hey, they all taste good. That's all we care about, right?
It.
All right, Carol, what's up? What's up next? What's on deck for you?
I have a native plant.
Oh, yay.
Yay. So this is Eastern hay-scented fern. Oh, boy. Well, I'm going to try to pronounce this name. Denstadia punctiloba. Punctiloba. No, it's punctiloba. And hardy from zones 3 to 8, very, very cold hardy. This is a native of the northeastern U.S. and the Appalachian Mountains. And what I like about it is that it's a nice, polite-sized fern. It gets 12 to 18 inches tall and 3 to 4 feet wide, so much wider than it gets tall. And you might get a fern that stands up straight and it's 2 feet tall, but that's really the max on this one. It has really nice during most of the season. Right now, it's making its little fiddle heads, and they're adorable. Most of the season, it's a beautiful soft green color, and it has very, very finely divided fronds. And so everything about it looks soft. And then in the fall, it gets this soft, like golden hay color, like sort of a buttery yellow. So it looks good all year long. It spreads by rhizomes, and so that it will grow together and form a mat, which really, really keeps the weeds down. You do have to be careful, because if you have some smaller, less aggressive plant, it will overtake it. I have an epimedium that I have to rescue this year. But it's pretty easy. Just, right now, when it's emerging, I'm just going to cut back some of those stolons and move them somewhere else, and I think it'll be fine. But if you plant it as a ground cover, you want to put it like on 18-inch centers, and then it should grow together. And you can get it, I think Prairie Nursery carries it as a 4-inch pot, so you plant as many of those as you need. It should grow together. For me, I got really lucky. This is a volunteer. In my garden. I saw it on the other side of the stream on the neighbor's property, and I thought, oh, wouldn't that be cool? And I was like, maybe I should steal a piece of it. And I didn't have to. It just showed up in my garden the following year.
Nice.
So wishes do come true. This is great for naturalizing at a woodland edge. It's good for, it does like some shade. It can take full sun, but you need a little more moisture. Tolerates poor rocky soil, and it can grow in clay, but just not if it's too soggy. But it's pretty adaptable. Somewhere I was reading, in its natural habitat, it tends to gravitate toward flat ground rather than sloping ground. And I'm not sure why that is, but that I have it on flat ground. It's doing great.
That's great.
Salt spray tolerant too. So if you're gardening near a road in New England or anywhere where they salt the roads, take note. This is one that can tolerate it.
It is a beautiful fern. I have it natively growing in, we have a wooded property, and there's a tremendous stand of it that's underneath some poplar trees, some tulip trees that we have that are just, on the woodland edge. And man, when it does that transition to that buttery yellow color in fall, and, you've got that late in the year sun hitting it, it's beautiful. If you blink twice, you would think that the woods were on fire, because it is that beautiful and reflects that late season light so lovely. But never thought about kind of transferring it into any of my garden areas. So, maybe miracles will happen for me and it will transfer itself just like it did for you. Well, all right. I have a fern too, but I'm not going to go there yet. I'm going to save that for last, so we're not doing back-to-back ferns here. But I went outside of my comfort zone. No, just kidding. I have a woody plant. Surprise! This is Siberian cypress, which is Microbiota dissecta, and it's zones 3 to 7. So, for those who are listening in our cooler zones, this is a great evergreen conifer for you. Only 6 to 12 inches tall, 3 to 12 feet wide. So if you can kind of envision that, it almost looks like, an eagle that's flying low to the ground. It has those very horizontal branching structures. However, don't get in your head that this is like a juniper. You got to put on the rose gauntlets in order to get in to clean it out. It's very, very soft and has more of a scale-like structure to its needles, quote unquote. So it's very, you just want to hug it, and it just has this very soft appearance. It is a bright green spray of needles, but it has a silver underside to it. So depending on how you're looking at it, it can start to kind of look almost silvery green from a distance. And as temperatures cool down in the fall and the winter, it gets this beautiful bronzy purple cast. Now, I hate it when people say, oh, like my cryptomeria changes a beautiful color in winter, and actually just turns brown and it kind of looks dead. That's not what the Siberian cypress does. It truly does get this plummish color to it, which is so striking and pretty at that time of year. It's great in very well-drained soils, full sun to partial shade, so it will tolerate some shade. But the big thing that you have to watch out for is that drainage issue. If it is in even just a little bit of a gully where its root system is, it is very prone to rot. So if you're in an area with a lot of winter wet, I would recommend kind of mounding it up or setting it on a berm. I have mine along a stone wall, so it really is elevated almost in this, raised bed environment. But just gorgeous. And because of those low, spreading eagle wing-like appearances to its branches, it just shades out everything. And it's a really, really nice. So it's a shrub, it's a woody, it's a 4-season plant, and it's shading out and doing a ground cover type action to it that, you think about ground covers, the first thing you don't think about is, a conifer, of course,
Does it make cones?
That's an excellent question. It makes berries. So I would think, no, it does not make cones. It actually makes these little insignificant little like waxy looking berries, but you really got to get in there and, shove your head into it to see them because they're held on the underside. So no cones, but berries. But I don't think that's the reason that you plant it, but unless you like shoving your head into a conifer. It's your last plant, Carol. It's your last plant. What is your last plant, Carol?
Mine is Viette's Little Susie Black-Eyed Susan.
What? I've never heard of that cultivar.
It's really cute. It is super cute. This is a Rudbeckia fulgida. And again, Viette's Little Susie, but I have seen it listed as just Little Susie. Okay. And it's funny that you were singing.
I know.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Yeah. But every time I see it, I get that like Wake Up Little Susie song stuck in my head. So this is a compact clump forming cultivar of our beloved Eastern U.S. native Black-Eyed Susan. And it gets only 24 to 30 inches tall and 1 to 2 feet wide. So nice, tiny, compact little plants compared to Gold Sturm is another, the more probably well-known version of this species. And these little Susie is like half the size or maybe even smaller than half the size. And if you plant them closely enough together, they have this wonderful mat, like a basal mat of foliage, dark green. I think it's a little hairy, but it really does a great job of suppressing weeds. So you probably want to plant these, like 18 inches apart or 12 to 18 inches apart if you're doing it as a ground cover. But what you will get is 10 weeks of flowers from July to October. And if it's happy, it can self-sow a little. So, you can get some bonus plants. And everyone knows what the flower looks like. It's that gold petals with a dark center. It makes a great cut flower. It needs full sun and dry to average soil with plenty of organic matter. So it's not a big fan of poor soil. It doesn't love being wet, especially in the wintertime, but it can tolerate hot, humid summers and some degree of drought once it's established. Good nectar plant. Butterflies love it. And if you leave the seed head standing, just like any of the black-eyed Susan, it's a natural bird feeder in the wintertime. So
Nice. Carol, spell the cultivar name for me. Viette?
Viette, Viette.
Okay.
Yeah, French last name, I'm guessing. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm not familiar with that cultivar. That sounds divine, actually, because regular Goldstrom can take over. It's a beefy plant. It has a tendency to get a little thuggish and kind of push some other plants out of the way. Anything that can compete with my Carex, I think of as a thug, and Goldstrom is one of those. But that just sounds so much more polite, and just the idea of a ground cover black-eyed Susan just tickles my fancy. I think that's so cute and adorable.
Yeah, you can fit this in places where other black-eyed Susans wouldn't go. It's even if you just planted one, it could be part of a mixed planting, but it wouldn't take over.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, okay, I made Carol spell the name of this plant, but if you are driving, I do not expect you to be driving and writing down these plant names. Please, for the love of goodness sake, go online to the podcast tab. We put pictures and plant lists of every single episode up there. So visit there to get your plant list. My neighbor told me the other day that, she was guilty of trying to write down plant names while listening to this podcast. I do not want to be responsible for any accidents, please. So yes, get a comprehensive list there and you'll get the proper spelling of Viette's black-eyed Susan. All right. Well, I'm going for the teeny tiny too. I went from eagle wings conifer over there to this is an obsession plant. I'm obsessed with this plant. I do not have this plant. It's Alpine water fern, which is Astroblechem penna marina. So marina, Alpine water fern, you're kind of getting the gist. Now, listen, this is probably marginally hardy for me. I don't care. I am going to try it anyway. It's zone 6B to 8. And I fell in love with this plant having seen it in a couple of the gardens that Susan Calhoun, who is a designer out in the Bainbridge Island, Washington, Seattle area. We've done a lot of articles with Susan over the years, and this is her jam plant. If she's got a shady area or a shady garden, she uses this plant as this Alpine water fern as her understory ground cover matrix plant in those shade gardens. And it is just about the most cute and adorable thing you ever did see. It's only 4 to 6 inches tall. It spreads 3 to 4 feet wide, very stoloniferous. Obviously, it is a full shade plant to partial shade. If you've got some dappled shade, it's underneath, some larger trees or a larger shrub, it'll still do okay. It likes moist, well-drained soil. Eventually, once established, it does tolerate dry shade. So you can imagine, if it's underneath trees, it's a perfect base plant. Those trees are greedy. They're stealing a lot of the water. So if you're making sure that this plant establishes itself for the first year, it does just fine in dry shade afterwards. It's got these really tiny, narrow, shiny fronds that they emerge a bright copper color and then eventually unfurl and fade to a bright green. But they're sturdy, they're waxy and sturdy looking, and it really does look like the type of fern that you would see growing at the bottom of, an aquarium or something like that. Like, it's got that look to it. It's really a crack filler too. I've seen it used really lovely along a stone wall edge or in an area, of a shady rock garden where it kind of just fills in all those cracks and crevices, which you kind of get a feeling that, oh yeah, that's because its native habitat is the mountains of Chile. So that's its preferred area and environment where it's getting some moisture, but it's really well drained, kind of rocky, gravelly soil. So again, that's Alpine water fern, zone 6B. I'm hoping a solid 6 to 8. And yeah, it's an obsession plant now for me. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about covering ground.
Sorry, Danielle, can't do the podcast right now. I'm currently in the British Virgin Islands. Then we're off to Spain, the Badlands of South Dakota, and then New York City, with a stopover in Luton to revisit the hometown delights, of course. I'll check back in when I can. Bye!
Well, Carol, it sounds like Peter's having a blast in his new phase of retirement. He surely is covering a lot of ground in his travels.
Yes, he is. I'm a little jealous.
I know, me too. We're going to travel to the West Coast. Us East Coast girls, we weighed in with our favorite weed-suppressing ground covers, but let's travel to the West Coast and see what our expert has to say.
Hi there. My name is Fanula Campion, and I'm the Fine Gardening Regional Reporter for Northern California. I'm also an avid gardener, of course, and the owner of Cottage Gardens of Petaluma, which is in beautiful Sonoma County, just 45 miles north of San Francisco. So I've been asked to join this discussion about weed-suppressing ground covers, and I gotta say, I love this topic. Most of us gardeners abhor the vacuum that is a bare patch of dirt in the garden for a whole bunch of reasons, weed potential being just one of them. So I'm happy to share new, wonderful ways of keeping weeds down, especially when I can share some lovely, beautiful ways of doing so. So my own garden has both sun and shade in fairly equal measures, and there's quite a few ground cover type plants I like to see filling in those bare patches of dirt. Whether it's for fronting a perennial border or spilling over the rock walls, or underplanting the woodland section of my garden, or just for plain keeping the weeds down. There's even more plants that I have on offer to the customers who shop with me at my garden center. I've always got my eyes out for new, exciting, or just plain unusual plants. But when it comes to ground covers, there's 3 or 4 reliable favorites I always seem to come back to. But before I let you in on what they are, let me start by explaining why I chose these particular ones. Any ground cover I use in my own garden, it's got to tick a number of boxes and fulfill a whole bunch of needs. It's not that I'm fussy, it's just that, like most gardeners, I work pretty hard in my garden, and I really, really want my plants to work just as hard as me. So for those boxes the weed-suppressing ground covers are supposed to tick, first of all, I want them to be evergreen. An evergreen plant is so useful because it keeps pesky weeds down all year long, not just from April to October in our growing season. So that's a real biggie for me. We all know just how much any given weed can happily take root and grow and flourish and self-seed during the cooler, wetter months of the year here in Northern California, and we want to prevent that. Next, is it a rugged, drought-resistant choice? Is it tough? Is it hardy? We've been struggling with water shortages for a number of years now here in Northern California. And so far, really, there's no end in sight. So anything we plant has got to be tough, resilient, and as water-wise as possible. I do make exceptions occasionally for something completely irresistible I need to try out, or for food crops, of course. But for a weed-suppressing ground cover, low water use is a must. Is my ground cover choice low maintenance and easy to care for? This is what I need. These plants are supposed to be working for me, blocking weed growth and giving me more time to putter about in the garden, pick flowers, watch the butterflies, laugh at hummingbirds, and generally enjoy the beauty all around me. They should not be adding even more chores to my already pretty long list. So, minimal maintenance. Bonus points go to the ground covers if they're also deer and gopher proof, both of which are a major problem in my garden. As we all know, these critters can decimate well-laid garden plans like nobody's business. So it's kind of important to me that my ground covers are at least somewhat critter resistant. But for me, the most important thing is, do I like this plant? Do I love it? Does something about this hard-working, low-growing, evergreen weed suppressor make me pause in my garden wanderings to stay still for a minute so that I can admire it? The leaf texture or the growth habit, the color or its flowers. I mean, really, think about this for a minute. We should never aim for boring in our gardens. And who cares if it's evergreen and keeps the weeds at bay if it's less interesting than the actual weeds it's supposed to be suppressing? Seriously, it's got to be useful and delightful in some way too. You might think this is a tall order. Not really. I can think of a slew of plants that fit the bill. What's hard for me is narrowing the list down to 3. So let's get started with my top 3 picks for weed-suppressing ground covers. For the shadier spots in the garden, hardy geraniums or cranesbills are just plain fabulous, especially the evergreen ones. And my new favorite is the lovely geranium Bertie Krug. This is a great plant to fill in any bare spots you might find on the north side of your house, or under Japanese maples, or really in any other garden area that's shaded from the hot afternoon sun. This charming little low grower makes these dense 4-inch tall creeping mats of shiny green foliage that has a beautiful bronzy tint to it. I actually really like this foliage a lot, even when it doesn't have flowers topping it. But it does look so cute all the way from spring through fall when those rosy little 5-petal flowers appear. Pollinators love these blooms too, and the year-round foliage color of this little sweetie goes beautifully with anything you want to plant it with. It's relatively drought tolerant, and it's ignored by gophers, rabbits, and deer, totally satisfying all my ground cover requirements. For an alternative, I'd say slightly less interesting, because it's green foliage and white flowers, you could go with Biacovo. It's another fabulous evergreen hardy geranium that really makes a wonderful weed-suppressing ground cover for shade. On to the sunnier parts of the garden. In full sun, a mass planting of any of the dwarf blue fescues makes for some fabulous weed blocking. They all grow so densely that weeds really have a hard time poking their weedy ways through. But if they do manage to do it, they're quite obvious about it, because they contrast so dramatically with the grassy blue foliage. So it makes for some very, very easy weeding. My favorite blue fescue is Beyond Blue, though, because that's exactly what it is. It is beyond blue. It's delightful. With its intense powder blue tufts of soft, touchable foliage, Beyond Blue fescue forms these super dense mounds, measuring about 8 to 12 inches tall and wide, and they kind of add bright little explosions of color to your garden bed all year long. Soft, buff-colored plumes top the whole plant in late summer, giving it a great kind of fall look and making it even more interesting. This beauty grows best in full sun, and it likes well-drained soil, and it's drought-tolerant, deer-proof, and very easy to care for. Similar in color, growth habit, size, and spread, I love the adorable little dwarf lavender called Thumbelina Lee. Rather similar in so many ways, except you get these beautiful little summer flowers on top of them. Let's move on to a shrubbier kind of a ground cover that I absolutely love and use quite a lot in my own garden. This is the carpet manzanita, the Arctostaffilis hybrid emerald carpet. I absolutely adore everything about this elegant low grower, from its gnarly cinnamon-colored stems and branches, its shiny, glossy, dark green leaves, the odd way the bark peels and curls, And then in spring, you get these clusters of dainty white bell-shaped blooms that are simply adorable. Plus, these flowers are adored by butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds. And when the flowers disappear, berries follow. And that makes it a great habitat plant for foraging birds and wildlife. It's a super dense hybridized California native, and it is beautiful. Yet at the same time, it's tough as nails, drought tolerant once established, and it grows just 10 to 12 inches tall, spreading up to 6 feet wide, which is a fabulous spread for just a single plant. Grow it in full sun to some afternoon shade, and give it well-drained, ever so slightly acidic soil, and that will make this beauty extremely happy. So there you have it. That's my top 3 choices for weed-suppressing ground covers here in Northern California. Try them out. I know you're going to love them.
I always love hearing the suggestions from experts that are so far outside of our zonal region. That was really fun to hear about those plants.
Yeah. And, zone envy. We could just sort of, hold ourselves together and suffer through our zone envy.
Right? I love it. Yes, zone envy for sure.